Today at Deutsche Auto Parts, we're going to be going over refinishing the headlights on a Mark IV Jetta. We use the 3M kit, which should be available at most auto parts stores. This does apply to pretty much any vehicle that has plastic headlight lenses. We started by cleaning our headlight with soap and water. We've now allowed it to dry, and then we have taped all around the edges of the headlight to prevent any damage to the paint during the sanding process. We now have our 500 grit sandpaper on, and what we're going to do is sand down until all of the yellowing has been removed. You'll kind of see as we go forward that you'll see it start to dissipate. So we're going to go ahead and proceed with that. When sanding, you don't want to hold this completely flat. You're going to give it a little bit of an angle, and you're going to want to hold on to the drill for control. We want to make sure we don't stay in one place too long, as it can cause damage to the light. As you can see, there's a lot of yellowing coming off. And we don't want to go super high speed on this. We want to keep it right around medium to low speed on this. And we're going to center our thing a little better here. And make sure you don't push down too hard. The instructions from 3M say that you want to have light to medium pressure, so don't go crazy. Really, all you're trying to do is take off material. If you put on too much pressure, you might end up causing permanent marks in the plastic that you're going to have to spend a long time sanding to get out. Now we're going to clean off our headlight just with some water and some towels just to see where we're at. And it looks like we have a pretty consistent glaze, but we might want to take a little bit more off. And just make sure that there's no more yellowing coming off. So now we've cleaned off our lens. We want to make sure that when you are finished with your first 500 grit that you have a consistent frost across the entire lens, and any material coming off is going to be no longer yellow, and you don't have any yellowing in the lens. You also want to make sure that if there are any imperfections in the lens anywhere, that you've sanded them out. If you have some that you can get out, you're going to want to continue to sand until they've been removed completely. So we're going to take another pass of this to remove some final stuff, and then we're going to move on to our 800 grit. So we've finished now with our 500 grit, and we're going to move on to our 800 grit. We can remove it and put our 800 grit on here and try to make sure it's as centered as you possibly can. And we're going to put that down and clean off this headlight just to make sure that we do have the even consistency that we're looking for in this. And get the bulk of any material off of here. And you are going to want to dry this before you proceed with the next one. So now as we proceed with our 800 grit, we do a very similar fashion to we did the 500 grit. We're just going to run across it, and we want to get it as even as possible. And what we're going to have is, right now this is a pretty cloudy frost type look. It's going to look similar but a little bit finer, and it's going to become a little more clear as we proceed here. All right, so we've finished now with our 800 grit, and we're going to take our water and wipe down our headlight and then inspect. Again, what we're looking for is a consistent look across the entire light, and just to make sure there's no inconsistencies or anything, or nothing that maybe needs to be taken down a little more. As long as that's the case, we are going to proceed to the next step, which is going to be our 3000 grit. Now the 3000 grit is going to be something that you use with water, like a wet sand type, and you're going to keep the whole headlamp moist and damp during the whole process. This will ensure you get everything pretty clear. Once you get down with the 3000 grit, this headlight is going to go from right now where it's pretty foggy still, a little bit clearer than previously with the 500, but now a little bit clearer, but then it's going to get very clear as we move on. So here we're going to switch to our 3000 grit, which is more of a foam pad than sandpaper like the previous ones. We'll try to get it as centered as we can, and we can spray down our headlight and then proceed with. Now, one thing we want to mention before we move forward, what 3M mentions is you want to take your passes, and then you're going to have a white slurry that comes from that, and they say to make, I believe, an additional 5 or 6 passes after you start seeing that white slurry across the entire light. So they mention if you don't see that white slurry, you should take a minimum of 10 to 12 passes. Really, you just want to make sure you take enough passes that you're going to clear the headlight. So we're going to spray again real quick just to keep this damp and start. One thing we also want to mention is this can be completely flat, so you don't need to worry about keeping this at an angle. Again, you don't want the headlight to be too dry, so we're going to dampen it again. So now that we've gotten our 3000 grit, we've taken this down, we're going to clean this off with just some water. And some paper towels. And it should be much more clear than your previous one. And now once we move on from this, we're going to move on to our foam pad with the compound, and we're going to let this dry before we do that. So here we have, we're going to remove our 3000 grit, and we're going to put on our foam pad. And then we have our compound here. And now what 3M says is to put a dime sized dab of this stuff on there. It's kind of hard to do because of the packet, but we're going to do our best. And what you're supposed to do is get it on there and then rub it around first. That way, when you start spinning your drill, you don't spray it all over the place. All that's going to do is create a mess. Now, they mentioned that you can use more if needed, so we're going to add another dime size dab onto our tip and spread it around again. Now you don't want to make sure you don't run this dry, because if you do, you might cause more harm than you have to start back over to get back anything caused by running it dry. So And now we're ready to clean it up. So now that we're done with our headlight, we just want to show you, here's our end result. It's not as clear as we'd like it to be because inside this headlight we have found that there is some dirt inside there. So it's keeping it a little bit from being a little more crystal clear than our other one that we did on the other side. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and leave any questions, ideas, or feedback in the comments below.